Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I'm a dumb man. I think I could do everything, but I don't know how to do anything. But guess what? The hot chick still wants to marry me at the end of the movie. Fart butt penis boobs.
This is how Jason always talks, really.
That's what I was
not even doing
too.
A bit. That's just his normal conversational style, I think.
Maybe I need to move more towards there so I can get the hot chick that Bill Maher got in the movie or what.
Yeah. So this movie does feature Bill Maher in this season of Awesome Movie Year. It's our 20th season. And so we are doing a retrospective kind of journey through many of the previous years that we've covered. We picked all of these episodes during our special draft episode. And in my first draft pick, I made the questionable decision to give in to nostalgia and pick from 1989 Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death, a movie that I remember watching multiple times on TV when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, maybe, and had not seen since. So I was curious how that would work out. But I remembered really enjoying this as a kid. And I feel like this is one of the first movies where I was aware of not just watching these kind of B movies and exploitation movies because they might have naked women in them or whatever, or gore. I mean, this isn't a horror movie, but that's another reason I might have watched movies like this, but that they could actually be clever and fun, and that the filmmakers behind movies like this could use their low budgets and their freedom to do something entertaining and witty, and or at least witty for a 14-year-old audience. So I was wondering if that would hold up. And I kind of think it did. I feel like we may have a disagreement on that front, but I do not regret having picked this movie for my first draft.
Hey man, if you want this to go down in the annals as your number one draft pick on Awesome Movie Year, that's on you, bro. I understand the desire to rewatch things because of nostalgia. And I don't disagree with the points you're making on B movies, but part of my issue with this film is it did none of those things far enough.
Maybe not far enough. I mean, I think it did it far enough for me to enjoy it, but could it have gone further with that? Yes, of course, certainly. I mean, the reason that this is maybe a minor cult object at best is because it doesn't do that in as effective a way as many other B movies that have much larger followings.
Yeah, it's like, getting touched over your pants here. This is dry humping this movie.
Jason's number one complaint about this movie seemed to be that the opening scene has some topless ladies and then there's no more topless ladies later. This is the first thing you said. This is the first thing you said to me when I asked, what did you think of the movie?
What I said is this has the perfect setup for a classic softcore screwball film, and they don't do any of those things. They promise you those things. Yes, I do think there should have been more sex and nudity. I think the violence should have been way better. I don't even think they tried in the violence in that, to the point where it took me out of the movie. And the writing got so lazy in the second half, I'm pretty sure a 1980s computer wrote it. So don't just say it's about titties, because it's about a whole lot more than titties.
I'm just saying that the number one thing on your list of disappointments in this movie was not enough titties.
I mean, no, there should have been more of all types of nudity. You want to show me Bill Maher's ass? Go for it. Why are you casting Shannon Tweed as a lead actress and she doesn't have one sex scene in the movie? That's very weird to me.
I think what they're doing with this movie, it's a PG-13 movie, and this was a direct-to-video release, and it's not necessarily aimed at that softcore audience. It is aimed at like 13-year-old boys who would have been able to rent it. And I think I expected, the way that you complained, that there would be some sort of really graphic nudity in that opening scene, and there's very brief glimpses. I'm sure.
I think that nudity was put in to sell it overseas after it was done, because all those women never come back and they're just there. And then someone's like, I could sell this in Uzbekistan, throw some boobies in it, that type of thing. But like I'm saying, we both agree this has like that classic, like kind of softcore setup kind of fun thing. And then it just doesn't deliver on any of those elements. So don't just make it about nudity.
I mean, I disagree, though. I think yes, there are no more naked women. And I think you're possibly right about the addition, because that opening scene features none of the actual main characters from the movie. And again, there's no more nudity later. But as far as the titillation of its theoretical audience, I mean, we have these scantily clad women throughout the film. The fact that all the violence takes place off screen is clearly, I mean, obviously it's a budgetary limitation, but it's also clearly set up as a joke that I thought was quite amusing. And the inept fighting in the kind of climactic scene between Shannon Tweed and Adrienne Barbeau, also meant to be a joke, also funny. So I disagree with you on that front. Could I have enjoyed more topless ladies? Sure. But I was fine without it. And I will say also that my initial enjoyment of this film as a young person came from watching it on TV. I'm pretty sure I never saw the topless ladies in this movie until I watched it just this week.
Listen, again, like, it's not just about that. Like, there are all types of scenes where, like, you think, oh, this is going to be the natural next step would be some type of sex scene here, and they never do it. The fighting, which you say, I totally disagree with you on that. You can get away with that joke once, but not 17 times. And then also they do show like some fighting, but it's always like, here, I put a sword on your face. Now the fight's over. Like, it's just bad, dude.
Right. It's campy.
No, it's bad. There's a difference.
There is a difference, but I found it campy and enjoyable. And I think it is done deliberately in that way. You have and that's one of the things about any B movie oftentimes that transcends limitations is they have those limitations, and a good filmmaker will say, okay, well, within the limitations that we have, what can we do that makes use of them, that finds something clever here, that doesn't just fail because we don't have the budget to do this or that.
Yes, I agree with you. This did not do that at all. This like overtly failed, like literally in your face. Here's the little minimum amount of effort we're putting in. It wasn't like a clever workaround. It was like, we'll just not try.
I mean, I don't think that okay, well, we'll table that for the moment. Clearly we disagree.
Slanderer
and
libelist. Pig.
Okay. So this was a direct-to-video film, which means I did not find any information about its box office take because there was none. And I did not find any budget information, although my guess is that it was quite low. It was a Charles Band production, the infamous producer of many, 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 many B movies for decades, and is currently distributed and available on DVD and Blu-ray, etc., via his Full Moon Productions. Although it wasn't a Full Moon production when it was made, it was actually distributed by Paramount, by a major studio, albeit on home video. It was shot at UC Riverside, all on the campus, so quite a varied location there on that if you decide to attend UC Riverside. I remember watching it on USA Up All Night, the TV show hosted by Rhonda Shear, one of the great horror sort of genre hosts from the heyday of that in the 80s and 90s. It was also featured on Elvira's 13 Nights of Elvira, and I believe possibly on the Joe Bob Briggs, one of his shows as well. This definitely is up his alley. And I loved all that stuff as a kid. And that would have been the reason why I'm sure I watched whatever Rhonda Shear was introducing at the time. And thank goodness for Rhonda Shear, who on her YouTube channel has all of these old Up All Night, not the movies, just her segments. And so I watched all of her host segments from this, including her interview with Bill Maher reflecting on this film. And he claims, and I couldn't tell if he was joking or not, but he claimed that at the time that in Carpinteria, California, which is near San Bernardino where this takes place, that there was a Cannibal Women festival with Rocky Horror style audience participation in this film. And I could believe that, maybe, especially because that was probably from like the early 90s when this movie was relatively recent. I'm sure it doesn't happen anymore, even if it ever happened once. And it's not clear to me whether it ever happened at all. Jason would not attend that festival.
I mean, I'd probably have more fun attending the festival than watching the movie. Was Rhonda Shear wearing a like purple pleather dress in this segment? Or?
She was wearing multiple different. She's wearing a very loud kind of, maybe pleather or something like that, like an orange crop top and a striped skirt in the Bill Maher interview. And he says that she raided the closet from Laugh-In, I think, or something like that. So high quality.
Josh, how come you misogynist pig only mention Rhonda Shear and not Gilbert Gottfried as the other host of Up All Night.
Well, because the segment is the when they showed this movie was Rhonda Shear was the host of it. But I did watch both. I mean, I enjoyed watching Up All Night. And like I said, Joe Bob Briggs as well, and Elvira. I don't know if I watched Elvira back then, if she was on any of the channels that we had. And shout out to Count Cool Rider, our local Vegas host, who went on to be a reality TV star. But I loved all those people throughout like my junior high and high school years. That was how I ended up watching a lot of these ridiculous B movies.
I mean, that's pretty much the ascent of what we could become. If like we maxed out our potential, being a host of like a B movie show would probably be where we land.
I would love that. I mean, sadly, it's not a thing anymore. You know, with the move to streaming, Joe Bob Briggs he's got his thing that he does on Shudder. And I recently went to the Joe Bob Briggs Drive-In Festival here in Las Vegas, and there was a night of horror hosts, and Sven Gulli, who also still exists and still has his own show, was there. And Rhonda Shear was supposed to be there as well, but she got waylaid by the hurricane, so she wasn't able to make it. So disappointing.
That is disappointing.
So also unable to be located for this film are reviews that were released at the time. Because it was not a theatrical release, basically no one covered it except for Variety. And usually I can locate even the more obscure Variety reviews, but all I have is the little snippet that they have on Wikipedia where they say it packs some good laughs and bad puns, but is unfortunately underproduced, giving Paramount Video an okay rental item. So that's really about as much as you could hope for from a Variety review of a straight-to-video movie, I think. So not bad, actually.
I mean, when you're building your jungle on UC Riverside or wherever, UC Santa Bernardino, like there's only so much you can do.
Right. And again, I feel like given the limitations of this, it is amusing and they do their best. Director J.F. Lawton, working under the pseudonym J.D. Athens. This was his debut. He got the chance from Charles Band, as many young filmmakers get the chance from these B-movie producers, as Roger Corman gave a chance to people like Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese.
This guy fits right in the
Charles Band gave this opportunity to young J.F. Lawton to make Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death.
No, that's pretty much all that there is to it. Look, see, you keep bringing up limitations, and I'm with you, Josh. Like, I believe it was the philosopher Goethe who said it is only through his limitations that an artist can find his true talents, right? But I think, again, that these limitations were just obstacles that they tried to not overcome. They were like, let's go around it instead of find a clever way through it. And that bothered me, Josh. It bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of lampshading those limitations rather than, in a way, you're right. Yeah, rather than finding a different way to depict something, they're making a joke of the idea that they can't depict it. The whole scene where they're in the boat going down the river and they're like, oh my God, there's a giant hippo that's going to attack us and we better shoot it and we're in so much danger. And they don't even pretend that the hippo is even there off screen. They're just kind of yelling at it. And I thought that was hilarious.
Again, that joke works once. It doesn't work for a whole movie.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that joke is the whole movie, but
that's a fair assessment.
There's more to it than that. I mean, there's some enjoyable, if not sophisticated, satire of misogyny and feminism, as Jason encapsulated in his intro there, that I found funny. And I mean, it's dumb. I'm not going to argue that it's not dumb. And I do think I agree with you that the second half is a bit repetitive and kind of goes downhill, but it's not a long movie and I chuckled throughout. So I'm glad I picked it. And if nothing else to make Jason annoyed.
No, I think what annoys me is like you have such high standards for films. And then when you see something like this, you just throw all of your standards out the window and it doesn't really compute other than that you hate men.
I mean, I don't think this, first of all, this movie definitely doesn't hate men. This movie is,
they just eat them constantly.
Yeah, the characters do in a ridiculous, over the top way. And I mean, I think there are different standards for different kinds of movies. And we've talked about many, many, many different kinds of movies on this show. And I wouldn't compare, like, first of all, this is not like one of my favorite movies of all time or anything. And
number one draft pick.
Yeah, because I thought it would be fun to talk about. And I wouldn't say that it is at the same level of quality as other movies that I love, but there are plenty, like I said, I enjoy watching this type of film. I enjoyed watching all of these B-movie TV showcases when I was a kid. I enjoyed going to that Joe Bob Drive-In Festival. And I think you can use different standards, right? To judge what a movie does that it's aiming to do. And obviously you feel like it fails at that.
I do.
And that's fair. And that's fair. You know, I feel like for what it is, this movie mostly succeeds. And that was why I enjoyed it.
I think Josh is also very consistent in that he's constantly writing about these kinds of, B movies and just, straight to video stuff and all that.
I was going to say nobody watches more B movies than Josh. He's the only journalist I know who has, for some reason, has dedicated his entire career to this. But he is the expert on them. And we have to take that into account. You are the B movie master.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think I would pale in comparison to someone like Joe Bob Briggs, but I do find this stuff fascinating, even when it's terrible. And I enjoy writing about it. I do write about other kinds of movies, lots of different kinds of movies. Much, again, like we cover so many different types of films on this show. I like having that variety. So Jason is already annoyed. Do you have any thoughts, any insights on the background of this film that you want to add?
My favorite thing about this movie is that Dave watched companion piece, Pizza Man, by the same director, starring Bill Maher. And I got to give all the dap in the world to Dave for doing that. Like, hey, this deserves further research. Let's, not that I wouldn't have tried to do that. And that was probably an Up All Night picture back in the day too. So look, I'm all for like low production, costs and like really like, hey kids, let's put on a show. But like I said, like this thing falls apart. I just feel like they stopped trying. And that bothered me more than anything is like, you agree that it careens off of a cliff in the second half. And I just felt like they stopped. They just were like, well, just figure out a way to wrap it up. And, Bill Maher can marry the hot co-ed and we'll call it a day.
So Dave, watching this movie, I figured this is Dave's kind of movie too, right? It's just so dumb and so ridiculous and so lowbrow. Had you seen this before?
I have to wonder. I did not remember it at all, but it does seem like something I would have watched back in the day, like those late night shows that you were talking about that you used to see it on. I must have seen it back then, and I used to love Bill Maher back then. So, I mean, I can just totally imagine it, but this was basically a first time watch because I did not remember one single thing about it. But yeah, this is, definitely up my alley. And I agree, like, even though I'm not going to go to bat for this as like some lost great movie or something like that. I think it does know what it's doing. I think it's meant to be funny, all this stuff. It's meant to be just kind of, shining a light on those limitations and just being like, hey, this is just a big goof.
I get, to me, the confusing thing is like, hey, you're making a low budget movie for a low budget producer. Like, how do you make the money back? You throw a lot of sex and violence in there, and they decided we're throwing no sex and no violence in there. And that just like confuses me so much because it's not like, no, we're going to stand on the strength of this piece from a technical, from a performance and from a writing standpoint. It's that's where I'm confused at. I feel like there was more to offer in all of those areas, which is what I want from a B movie. Okay. Like I like that stuff, and this just doesn't give it to me.
I mean, A, I don't think any of that would have improved the movie because that's not the kind of movie that it is. And B, I guarantee you, if Charles Band had said, put more sex and more violence in this movie, there would have been more sex and more violence in the movie. I think this movie is intended for a different audience than those R-rated B movies that are full of sex and violence. Charles Band has produced tons and tons, for example, of kids movies. Now, this is obviously not a kids movie, but he definitely is one of these producers who knows that there's like multiple tiers of audience that you can reach with your low budget films. And one of those is that R-rated sex and violence audience. But one of those is, like I was saying, there's this sort of teen and tween boys or whatever, people who are going to be able to rent or watch on TV a PG-13 movie. You can show this on Up All Night because it only has that tiny moment of nudity. If it was full of violence and nudity, you couldn't show it on Up All Night.
Oh, they showed plenty of things that were full of violence and nudity edited in magical ways on Up All Night. You as a 14-year-old, Josh, weren't trying to rent like softcore like Bikini Car Wash Company movies as opposed to softcores like this that aren't softcore at all?
I mean, sure, I rented or watched stuff, not Bikini Car Wash Company, but stuff that was R-rated or whatever. Yeah, I got to see those at like sleepovers and things like that. But, you know, I watched this on TV, and I'm sure, like, yes, you're right. They edit some of those movies for TV with much more graphic content, but I'm sure it's easier if you don't have to do that. So I'm just saying, like, this is not the kind of movie where the producer is like, I want sex and nudity and violence, and J.F. Lawton is standing on his principles. He's giving the producer exactly what the producer wants, and that's what this is.
He wrote the movie, so, you know. At the same time, like, you know, we're in the 80s, and, you know, we're going for those teen comedies and those teen sex romps, and then in the 90s, they kind of move more into those, like, 90s, like, kind of titillation pictures for teenagers that don't like go too graphic, but like are kind of more up the alley of teenagers. And I don't think this hits either of those beats. Like, I don't see how you'd be like, oh, I just watched Cruel Intentions. Now the next hot movie I want to watch is Cannibal Women of the Avocado Jungle.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I don't think that is the same in any way. But I think it's about accessibility, that, you know, that this is a movie, like, you go to the video store, you can rent it because it's a PG-13 movie. So
I just don't see. I mean, you're saying you as at that age would be looking to rent something like this. I'm saying I think you're the only person I know who at that age would have been like, let's go for the PG-13. I would have at least tried to switch a box and, you know, put it.
I mean, I wouldn't have rented it because it was PG-13. I would have rented it because it was Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. And the fact that it's PG-13 means that I could have rented it. That is all. I wouldn't have to get my parents to do it for me.
Yeah. I used to rent the R-rated ones, and you know, they would always call me on them. Like, the guy behind the counter would be like, "I know why you're renting this." I'm like, "Well, why else does someone rent Snapdragon with Pamela Anderson, buddy?"
Right. But, you know, some of those can turn out to be clever, and I think this is.
I agree. So, you know,
we'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death.
We won't. This is all I had.
Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this second episode of our retrospective season, we're looking at 1989 for my pick, Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. And Jason, you're tapped out on your commentary on this film.
But look, obviously it's always fun when we disagree on things. You know, we all like that. The audience, the ratings spike, Josh, you know. They make it to like in between like Rogan and My Favorite Murder on podcast charts with these episodes. So I'm sure this one's going to do huge number. But Josh, I would rather ask, what did you like about it when you were young, and how did that hold up today? And I know you've kind of touched on that. You're saying you enjoyed the humor, and I'm saying what humor, and you're saying it holds up, and I'm saying what holds up.
Well, right. I do think that I enjoyed the humor of this movie when I was a kid. I mean, I think I would have probably watched it if I was watching, you know, Rhonda Shear or whatever, and she said, "Hey, we've got Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death," because you have to acknowledge, that is a fantastic title.
I agree with that. So, yeah.
So I would have thought, and it sounds more like a horror movie or whatever. So I would have thought, okay, I'm going to watch Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death because that sounds like some crazy thing that I will enjoy. And I think then I would have discovered that it was campier and funnier than I might have imagined based on that title. And this was from the time where not only was I watching, you know, horror B movies and stuff like that, but as you know, I feel like Dave and I have in common, this was the height of when I was a fan of Weird Al Yankovic and like the Naked Gun movies, and I read Leslie Nielsen's fake autobiography, which I'm sure is very bad. So all of that kind of like spoofy, pun-based humor, I was really into. And this definitely reminds me of those Abraham Zucker movies. It reminds me of UHF, which came out in that same year. So Rhonda Shear, you know, comes from, not that she was involved in this film, but, you know, supports it and comes from that same comedy scene as Weird Al and Pee Wee Herman and Elvira. And I feel like that is all in that same kind of sensibility of this deliberate goofiness. And like you said, Jason, the kind of let's put on a show aspect of it. I also probably at that time did like Bill Maher, which I will regret. And
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that doesn't hold up here is that Bill Maher is a really, really bad actor.
He's
And
no worse than Shannon Tweed. Shannon Tweed's terrible in this movie.
I disagree. I think Shannon Tweed is great in this movie. I think she gets
That's
the
insane.
perfect
person.
in perfect balance of like, being hot Shannon Tweed, which is what people are there for, and like delivering the humor of her character. I think Adrienne Barbeau has a tougher time, and she's a more, quote, respectable actor than Shannon Tweed is. But when she comes in later in the film as the leader of the Cannibal Women, the former feminist professor who's gone native in the jungle, she seems to be taking it a little too seriously, and it does drag it down.
So I'm going to give Adrienne Barbeau a pass on this one because in my research, I read that they could only afford her for one day. And that means she had to do 17 pages of dialogue in a day. So, I mean, you're not really putting her in a position to succeed. That said, she doesn't succeed. Right.
Right. I mean, and that's another classic B-movie thing. I see so many, talking about like writing about these movies now. I see so many of these movies, and that's exactly what they do. They get some slightly bigger name and they have them on set for a day and they milk that. They don't do that here in this movie. A lot of times what they'll do is they kind of intersperse their scenes that they clearly shot on the same day, like throughout the movie, as if they're in the whole movie.
Right. Cut
Adrienne Barbeau,
Eric Roberts on the phone.
Right, exactly.
Tie or something.
Exactly. But Adrienne Barbeau is kind of in a concentrated segment of this film. And that's fair, right? She kind of shows up and she doesn't really know what she's doing. And that really seemed like she didn't quite understand what the movie was. And that may be because she wasn't around. She wasn't, Bill Maher was like J.F. Lawton's friend. And they probably had a lot of conversations about what kind of movie this was going to be. But yeah, Bill Maher, and I think Bill Maher would be the first to admit that he's not an actor. And this is one of his only leading roles in anything aside from Pizza Man from J.F. Lawton. So, I mean, that to me doesn't hold up. I mean, there are definitely some jokes that that are dated in their references. We have the tribe of the kind of emasculated men, and they're all referencing Phil Donahue and Walter Mondale and Alan Alda.
Which is stuff that you would normally hate.
I mean, that I don't know that I would hate it, but that was a little
hacky,
easy. Yeah,
lame.
That was a little hacky. I mean, I think that tribe in general is kind of funny, but some of the way that they throw in those references is a little like he didn't think of, he thought of the first joke that he could think of.
Right. And having watched a ton of movies with you, when we get to like the easy punchline, I always, get that from you, or the, like the tisk tisk. And I mean, dude, tying those two elements together, Adrienne Barbeau and the tisk tisk, right?
Sure.
The entire send up of Hearts of Darkness or Apocalypse Now, when she's like, do you know what it's like to be on David Letterman? Oh, the horror. It's not only dated, it was probably terrible back then. It's terribly written, and it doesn't deliver at all on the spoof, which kind of brings me back to when our 77 season, when you just emasculated Dave over and over for his pick of Kentucky Fried Movie. And that spoof is way more effective than this spoof, I'd say.
Well, I think that the spoofing here is lighter than in something like Kentucky Fried Movie or in something like Airplane or The Naked Gun, where really, especially those movies, where really it entirely rests on the idea of making fun of a very specific type of movie.
Yes.
The other thing that I thought about while I was watching this movie this time is that when I first saw this, when I was 12 or 13 or whatever, I had no idea what Apocalypse Now was, or Hearts of Darkness, or like The African Queen, or 2001, or anything that they're parodying in this movie. I would never have seen those. Maybe I would have heard of them. And I still found this hilarious. So I feel like the spoof aspect of it is minor. I agree with you that probably the weakest humor in this movie is the bit with the tribe of emasculated men. It is a bit hacky. I didn't remember a lot of details. And so when they get to saying they're the Donahues, I was like, oh, really? That's the best he came up with? I'm with you on that one. I think the Hearts of Darkness parody is more effective and is more amusing, and her horror being going on a talk show. I feel like David Letterman was maybe the wrong choice of talk show host there as a reference, because he's not known for being like hard hitting or whatever, or being, anti-feminist per se. But the idea that her horror was simply having to go on talk shows all the time and be the token feminist, I thought that was funny.
I just have to jump in really quick because you guys are making fun of those tribesmen and how poorly written, how bad that joke was. I only write down a few notes for these podcasts because, I'm obviously not one of the main hosts. But that was one of the few things I wrote down that made me laugh. So, yeah.
Is that the reason why you didn't plug us at the Arch Street Fair and you just focused on piecing it together and didn't
Actually, your logo was on the flyers. So,
how about that?
Thanks, Dave.
Josh, you know what I hate is idiots for idiots' sake, right? Like, Bill Maher, that character is a moron, but like they're literally cooking him in a pot with vegetables, and he's like, "Hey, this smells good. This is fun. What kind of bath am I taking?" Like, come on, man! Like, he's not that oblivious that he can't figure out he's about to be eaten, especially when he knows the history of this tribe because they've gone over it the entire movie.
Okay, this is not a legit complaint. I'm sorry. This is comedy. This is like complaining that Elmer Fudd didn't recognize Bugs Bunny when he was dressed as a lady bunny. Like, this is a cartoon. Come on, man.
No, now you're besmirching the good name of Looney Tunes by comparing it to this film. But that's fine. Dave, you watch Pizza Man. Tell us about the nuances of Bill Maher as an actor in this one versus that one.
Well, I think that belongs more in the legacy, but he's just as bad in Pizza Man. Although at least he, is trying for something unique in that movie. But we could talk about that some more.
Is that just he's a pizza man and he bangs all the pizza deliveries that he gets to, or what is it?
Not at all. That's not what happens at all. Should I go down this path right now, or should we save it for later?
We need to hear it.
I mean, it's basically a Parker movie. He goes to deliver a pizza and it's this mob boss and he doesn't want to pay him and he just wants his $15. And so he beats up the mob boss and then finds that he's got this woman kidnapped and she won't pay him either. And then she's actually working for someone else. And that leads up a chain that gets into this whole government conspiracy. And it's all played like a hard-boiled noir. And, eventually, I know you guys are never going to watch it, so I'm going to spoil it for you because this was made in 1991, but it gets all the way to the top of all these real life political people. There's like, Nixon and all these people in there. Who's at the very top of the chain?
Gorbachev.
How about you, Josh? Guess?
I know the answer because I've looked it up online. It's Donald Trump.
It's Donald Trump.
That's sadly accurate, I guess.
Yes.
Right. Well, and one of the other things, we didn't really summarize the plot here, but the idea is that in this movie, California is like 1/3 covered with some uncharted jungle where they harvest avocados. And of course, the focus on avocados as this object of highly coveted value is a bit prescient in this film that became, this sort of hipster totem many, many decades later. But I mean, all the stuff with the military guys at the beginning, that's kind of Dr. Strangelove-ish. I mean, again, I'm not trying to say that this movie is as sophisticated or clever as Dr. Strangelove, but it gets at that similar kind of humor. I feel like it's funny the way that they're talking about relocating the Cannibal Women to their reservation in Malibu where it's condos and they're going to buy them subscriptions to Cosmopolitan. And it made me laugh. And I sat stone-faced through, for example, Kentucky Fried Movie. And this movie, I was chuckling all the
way. That's just a wild idiosyncrasy that you have there, buddy. So.
Yeah.
Jason, I was wondering, Jason, you bring up Jersey all the time on the podcast. Me growing up in Pennsylvania, I had never really even heard of avocados until I moved out west.
I kind of agree. I knew what they were, but avocados weren't a big thing, and Mexican food back east consisted of giant taco bowls, a taco salad and a hard shell taco. And it's oh, I'm having a salad with 17,000 calories.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
But that was a different time. I mean, again, you could look back at that time, Jersey, Pennsylvania, that's all red sauce Italian, right? Heavy red sauce. So Josh, as you had wanted, we are going into the culinary evolution that has come out of this film. But yeah, no, I just, the actor, Josh, who I thought fared the best was Karen Mistal, who played Bunny, the hot ditzy co-ed. And I was I would watch Return of the Killer Tomatoes or something like that she's in. I thought she did a good job as that, ditzy co-ed, and she was fun in it.
Yeah, and I think they play that character exactly right. where she's ditzy but they're not condescending to her per se, or not any more so than they are to any of the other characters. But she's also not like secretly a genius or anything like that we're going to learn. She's just a happy-go-lucky kind of dim-witted person, and she's friendly and enjoyable to watch. And I haven't seen Return of the Killer Tomatoes, but I think on Letterboxd a few people comparing also the tone of this movie to that. And Dave, that feels like something you would have seen. Have you seen that?
I don't remember which ones I've watched of those. Is there a lot of Killer Tomatoes movies?
There's at least two. I mean, there was The Attack, and then there was The Return. I don't know if there's more than that. One of them has George Clooney in it, I think.
Yeah,
that's right. I think you're right. Yeah, I definitely saw the original. I'm pretty sure I saw the sequel, but again, that's like so many years ago.
Maybe we could draft it in our next movie draft.
I'd be up for that. I haven't seen either of those, and I'm all for Killer
I'd be up for
movies.
it too. Listen, you're painting me as a guy who hates B movies and camp, and I just think that's totally incorrect. I like B movies and I like camp. I just think this failed at all of it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair. I do think that even aside from B movies and camp, you seem to be someone who is often very focused on like the logistics, logic and things like that.
Yes.
And you kind of have to let that go for something like this. And I'm okay with that. But I will say, just to go back to the culinary discussion, I grew up in California and I had guacamole as like a staple of, snacks and party diets throughout my childhood. So I guess I was more familiar with the whole avocado economy when I watched this film. Maybe that made a difference.
Do you still like guacamole, Josh?
I don't. It's one of those foods where, you have, sometimes I got sick one time after eating a bunch of it, and I couldn't eat it anymore. Yeah. So, I mean, that's not the guacamole's fault, but it doesn't appeal to me.
That happened
anymore.
to me with Sour Patch Kids. So I think the solution here is that we make a batch of guacamole with Sour Patch Kids in them and we eat them together.
Sounds delicious. So I did appreciate the constant eating of Fritos that Bunny has in this film. And she's just walking around with her bag of Fritos as they're getting kidnapped and possibly being eaten by the Cannibal Women.
I grew up not liking guacamole, and now I love guacamole.
And
Josh,
yet you still didn't love this movie.
No, that's so crazy. And I love avocados too. Well, if only they had put avocado toast in it, then they would really be prescient of the future.
So true.
What about the other tribe of women? Let's talk about them for
the Barracuda women, right? Who are the tribe we don't know about until Shannon Tweed escapes from the clutches of the Piranha Women and runs away and discovers the Barracuda Women, who are the sworn enemies of the Piranha Women. And she thinks, oh, finally, these are the women who realize that we should not kill and eat men. But that's not the case. They just think that instead of guacamole, they should eat the men with clam dip, which of course is this,
Josh.
You might as well have a wah wah in the background, but I feel like it's played right. And I enjoyed that. And also for some reason, there's like a giant clam that they just like sort of pass around briefly and never mention in the background of that scene, which I thought was
But to me, that's like you were saying, they just went with the easiest first joke. That's the easiest first joke. What if they're the exact same, but they like nacho cheese or something like that, right? It's just so easy. I thought it was very lame. And also, nobody eats people with clam dip, Josh. That's ridiculous.
They only eat people with guacamole?
I mean, that makes more sense,
Well, we know how concerned you are with the logic of these things. So,
if you were going to eat a human, Josh, what would you marinate or use as your side with?
Well, like I said, I don't eat guacamole anymore. I've never liked clam dip, so I would probably go for the nacho cheese. That sounds pretty good. Maybe like loaded nachos with human meat instead of carne asada or whatever.
You know what you could do? You could take the skin and crisp it up so that's like the chip, and then put the meat on top and then really double down on your human nachos there.
Well, there is a scene where Bunny is being fed the human meat as she's preparing because she's going to join the Piranha Women. And she says, oh, this is so tasty. And I don't know what they used, but it did look kind of crispy, like it was beef jerky or something like that they used.
That was another weird element. I was like, is she joining the Piranha Women to like infiltrate them and then like save people? But it just went nowhere when she was joining the Piranha.
I mean, I think the thing is that she has this personality where she's just happy to go along with things. She takes the feminist class and she's like, oh, professor, I want to be a feminist. And then they go meet the Piranha Women and she's like, I want to be a Piranha Woman. And then they leave and Bill Maher's there and she's like, okay, Bill Maher, I'll marry you. She just kind of does whatever comes into her head.
I mean, Josh, you and I both, and Dave too, we like dumb, smart movies, right?
Yeah.
I think we could write a much better movie like this. And I challenge us to do it and put it on Dave's Patreon.
Miracle Beach 2 coming up again here.
Oh, there we go.
I mean, that's exactly what that was. Miracle Beach, 100% in the same category as this film, not as clever. But
Right.
what we attempted as teenagers to do was to write a clever version of that. And I guarantee, even if it didn't come up when we were writing, that I was thinking about this movie when we were working on Miracle Beach 2.
You know, it's so, Josh knows this, lately I've had to pitch a lot of Christmas movies. And one thought I had, and you guys tell me if this has been done, but I don't think it has. There hasn't been like a Wayne's Brothers or an Airplane style Christmas movie that spoofs the entire genre like that, right?
Not really. There's a movie called A Christmas Movie Christmas that is sort of a gentle spoof. The idea is the main character gets like sucked into the world of Hallmark style Christmas movies. But I think it is not, you could do a better job or do a more comedic, like over the top Wayans Brothers, Zucker Brothers kind of version of that it doesn't particularly do it. What I want to see though is Cannibal Women Christmas. That's what I'm here for.
Well, my point was, I think that, and I don't know if it would work now because like this genre is almost irrelevant, sadly, but like someone could have done a real spoof of all these like B-movie sex coms and like that would have been a fun way to take a film like this.
Yeah, I think it would at this point be outdated. Although Charles Band still churning out films, absolutely, but not to the kind of audience that he used to have, unfortunately. So should we rate this? I feel like we've exhausted Jason's outrage, and maybe we should go rate this out of five avocados
or 5 human meats.
5 human meats, 5 humans dipped in avocado in guacamole.
Josh, it's your show, buddy. You go for it.
I mean, I give it a 3 out of 5. Like I said, I don't think this is like a great movie. I think this is a fun movie if you are into this kind of thing. And I enjoyed watching it, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a lost classic. So 3 out of 5 for me.
And I like this type of movie when it's done well. And that's why I'm giving this 2 out of 5 humans with avocados on there, because this was not done well.
Dave, how would you rate this?
I was between 3 and 3.5, but I decided to go with 3.5 because
You're a son of a bitch, Dave.
No, I appreciate that because again, I was watching this and there was a scene early on where Shannon Tweed's professor character goes to the like teaching supplies office.
Oh, yeah,
and she's asking she starts with like, oh, I need some legal pads and some manila envelopes. And then it's like, and I need some, firearms and ammunition and rope. And the escalation there, I was like, this is 100% a scene that you could have lifted right out of this and put into UHF or put into a Naked Gun movie. And I guarantee Dave will enjoy this.
But those movies, I like those movies that you're talking about. And to me, like the height might be like Wet Hot American Summer, which we bring up all the time. But like I said, like the first maybe 30 minutes, like I'm into this. And then I'm like, I just felt like they stopped trying, like to get to where the jokes were at the end. I just felt like they were like, well, we just got to finish this. So let's just write whatever comes in and not worry about it. Like, I don't think it held up the whole way through of that level of that one particular joke.
Right. That one joke. I mean, I think, and it's interesting because you pointed out how they had to shoot all of Adrienne Barbeau's scenes in a day. And maybe those were rushed and they don't have the chance as much to do, more takes to kind of get the humor, or maybe even who knows if Bill Maher did some improv or something like that in there. But I still think it was funny enough. I agree the first half is funnier, but I think it was funny enough throughout. So, we're not in agreement on this one, and that's okay.
That's okay.
We'll come back and talk about the legacy of Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our 20th retrospective season, we're talking about my first pick, 1989's Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. And we've already talked about some of this legacy, it being featured on these late night B-movie shows like Up All Night and Elvira, and the possibly apocryphal festival in Carpinteria, which I would have loved to have attended if it in fact existed.
I mean, that feels like that would be a great movie for like Ari Aster to make, like you're going to a festival of a B movie and there's a real killer at the festival and whatnot. And like, that'd be a super fun take on something like
that would be fun. I feel like it's a little too goofy for Ari Aster maybe, but I absolutely think that could be a fun horror movie to make. And we should revive the Cannibal Women Festival in Carpinteria. Dave already described the brilliant pizza man from J.F. Lawton and Bill Maher. Also, J.F. Lawton credited there under his pseudonym J.D. Athens. And he graduated from these B movies to some pretty major Hollywood work for a brief period of time. He wrote Pretty Woman, he wrote Under Siege, and some less successful films. And he created, I don't remember if I watched this show, but I feel like this is the kind of thing that probably has the same tone as Cannibal Women, which was the TV series VIP, starring Pamela Anderson. And I'm sort of surprised I didn't watch this show because these first run syndication shows with that kind of humor, I also loved. I remember watching like Cleopatra 2525 and was it Briscoe County Jr. and things like that. So I didn't see it, but he was the creator of that. And his last credit, film and TV wise, was back in 2008 for writing and directing a drama called Jackson about two homeless men. I'm not sure if that's really the genre for him, but he's continued, I think, to develop stuff. I didn't find a whole lot about him more recently. His IMDb bio claims that he was developing a script with the creators of South Park, but that could have been 15 years ago. He did, however, write a novel in 2018 called Cosmic Rays Celestial Revival, which I will not be reading.
Well, he's an advocate for dyslexia and ADHD, so that's cool. And he supports a lot of nice causes there, Josh. Some of the other movies you didn't mention, he wrote Blank Man, which I'm sure Dave's all about. He did direct The Hunted with Christopher Lambert and Joan Chen. And then Chain Reaction, is that Keanu, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
he had a good run. I mean, dude, he wrote Pretty Women. That's amazing.
Right. I mean, and having written that and Under Siege, if he's gotten, the royalties or the residuals or whatever on that, if he got a good deal, then he's probably set for life. But Blank Man that's a parody, right? It's kind of a superhero parody. Have you seen that, Dave?
I not since the theater, but I remember I loved it back then, though.
I did not.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
So I bet.
No, I haven't seen Blank Man, but the dual reaction there is exactly what I would have expected.
I just remember David Allen Greer yelling, "What I got to do, Sammy? Paint a target on my ass?" I still remember that line. But I just read this book, which is a great book, The Last Action Heroes, about all the 80s action stars, and they talk about Under Siege in there. And Seagal, who seems like maybe the worst person you could ever meet, right?
Yeah.
And just how out of control his ego was at this time. And I think Under Siege was originally for Clint Eastwood. And then he's like, ooh, if Clint Eastwood wants it, I'll just take it from him to
right.
To rat fuck him or whatnot, and he did. And then of course that movie became crazy and like Tommy Lee Jones, kills it in that movie. But I think that probably bothered Steven Seagal that Tommy Lee Jones is so good in that movie. So
yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. I remember really liking that and always holding it up as like the one genuinely decent Steven Seagal movie because it kind of just follows the Die Hard formula. But I don't know if it would hold up now. I've seen, sadly, talking about my interest in B movies, I've seen way more modern Steven Seagal movies than any person should ever watch.
The move with Seagal would be to go back to the beginning and watch like those first few lower budget ones, like we're talking about,
right.
To see how they utilize the limitations of what they had to make, better movies. Above the Law, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah. Hard to Kill, Marked for Death. I saw all those back when they first came out. I mean, the thing about Seagal is I think he was actually genuinely good at martial arts when he was younger and maybe was a terrible person all along, but at least he was able to show off those skills. And now if you watch Steven Seagal in a movie, you're joking about Eric Roberts on the phone, in different outfits. I've seen multiple Steven Seagal movies where he literally never gets out of his chair. So that's where he is right now.
I believe that. There is one story in that book that's great, and I'd have to look up the name, but there was like an old pro wrestler who was a shooter, a guy who could really like grapple you and stretch you and everything. And he became a stuntman in Seagal's movies, and Seagal was talking shit, and this guy just like knocked him out and stretched him, and then Seagal had him fired the next day. So, and then would never admit that he like got taken down. So
yeah, I think I feel like I've read that story in interviews with various people who've worked with Seagal as well as a pretty well-known story. So as we said, Bill Maher, not a good actor, and definitely recognized that fact about himself. Other than this and Pizza Man, he really didn't have any starring roles in movies, made some TV guest appearances, but his acting career, other than appearing as himself, basically ended in the early 90s. And of course, he's been very, very successful as a talk show host. And, we don't need to debate Bill Maher's, sort of political position. But I do feel like the personality of the character in this film, even if Bill Maher himself would not express such sexist views, the kind of way that he presents himself is very similar to how Bill Maher presents himself on his shows.
I liked Religulous, the documentary about him just trying to talk about how ridiculous religion is. And, the thing about Bill Maher, like, I was like, when I'm watching this, I'm like, I could have seen him like coast into like Neighbor on, King of Queens type show, right? But you got to give him credit. I don't think he's a great stand-up, but he's a good enough stand-up where he's able to draw audiences still. But what he's great at is cultivating an audience who will go with him anywhere. Like, Politically Incorrect, Real Time, shows I watched regularly, very regularly. I used to watch Real Time like every week. And now he's got that Club Random podcast where I catch a clip here and there. Like, he's gone, very extreme with libertarianism, and we don't, whatever, that's who he is. But I do give him credit for finding his lane, which no one really had that lane on the left, like being kind of like that, like, I guess you would say loudmouth, controversial, democratic, comedic voice, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think the other thing, I think by the time Real Time came on, I had been maybe disillusioned with him, but I was definitely a regular viewer of Politically Incorrect, really a fan of that. And I think now all these talk show hosts, you have The Daily Show, or even regular late night shows like Seth Meyers and Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel, like the fact that those people will take political stances and talk about political stuff is taken for granted, but Politically Incorrect predated all of that. And so Bill Maher really tapped into something that obviously had a lot of appeal for people and did it before anyone else did it. And whether you like him, his personality, or his views or not, he definitely was a pioneer in that space of being able to say, hey, I'm a comedian, but I'm going to, channel that into this political discussion and combine those two things. And that's something people will want to see.
So I've seen him perform live once. I thought it was okay. Like I said, like, he had a set list out, which is, that's fine if that's what you want to do. And, but he does develop a ton of material. He's probably had like 10 specials at least. And, he's got a loyal audience. So he's succeeded beyond what most comedians could dream about, I'd say.
Yeah. And Dave, you said you were a fan around this time as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like, right up into Real Time, I think, watching political comedy after, Trump's first election just kind of went downhill. It's like, I don't want to watch any of this anymore,
Yeah, I agree. But Maher specifically, I think I maybe fell off even before then. Shannon Tweed, as we sort of alluded to.
Legend Shannon Tweed, Josh.
Became a queen of low-budget B-movies, especially erotic thrillers. Not so much comedic stuff like this, but more hard-boiled, I guess you could say, and certainly known for sex scenes and stuff. I don't know if I've seen much of her stuff, honestly. She did a Las Vegas movie called Hard Vice that I have not seen, but is on my list of Las Vegas movies to check out. Jason, you seem to have a passion for Shannon Tweed.
She was the Playboy Playmate of the Year in 1982. I think if you've never seen her softcore work, you've probably seen her in Detroit Rock City. That would be what I would guess in the mainstream thing, or in Gene Simmons' Family Jewels, the reality show. She's married to Gene Simmons. But Josh, you haven't seen Indecent Behavior 3. You haven't seen Body Chemistry 4, Full Exposure. You haven't seen Night Eyes 2. What are you doing, man?
I have not seen any of those, nor have I seen Detroit Rock City for that matter. Have you actually seen those movies that you just mentioned?
I couldn't tell you by name, but I could maybe remember some scenes from
some clips.
Yeah. I mean, imagine right now, maybe that's the move, is to like go on TikTok and just do like softcore clips or something. Like that's the new, way for this genre, maybe. Who knows? So.
Yeah, I don't know. Shannon Tweed basically retired, seemingly, other than making kind of occasional appearances as herself. Like you said, she's married to Gene Simmons. They had their reality show. I'm sure she does fine. And, I would imagine she probably does the convention circuit. So many of these B-movie stars and like scream queens and stuff like that make a lot of money out of just doing fan appearances. And I'm sure it's lovely for them to meet the people who appreciated the work that was unappreciated at the time that they did it. So that's
who is
lovely.
your favorite of the softcore queens, Josh?
I don't know. I feel like I was not as much a connoisseur of these movies as you were. I gravitated quickly more toward the horror stuff and was perhaps more drawn to the violence and gore of those movies. Not that I didn't enjoy the nudity as well. So I don't know. I feel like you asked this question because you have your own answer to it.
Well, no, I mean, there are so many of them that I just was wondering.
Julie Strain. I like Julie Strain.
I think she would be the other big.
Literally bigger. Yeah. She was very tall.
Yeah. So, Shannon Weary. Remember that was the other Shannon from
I don't know if I remember her.
Joan Severance, that would probably fall in line with your kind of more violent take.
I interviewed Joan Severance one time. I can't remember why, but I remember doing that for Las Vegas Weekly. She was doing some event in Las Vegas or something. That's a weird memory to bring up. She was very nice, I think.
Donna Spear, I think, did all those like hard ticket to Hawaii and Miami connections. And, they're we know Anna Nicole Smith, Julie K. Smith, who like just looked like Anna Nicole Smith and probably picked her last name because of that. So there's plenty of them to look up, Josh. There's plenty of softcores for you to watch out there. Of course, Josh, I'll recommend Susan Featherly in Virtual Vegas, a film that I worked on.
Yeah, Jason really was immersed in this world for a brief period of time in his early career. So
I might be taking it a bit too far, but that's okay. So I did work on 2 softcores with a producer now who is hugely successful.
So, as you said, Karen Mistal, kind of a highlight of this film as Bunny, but didn't have much of a career beyond this, some TV guest spots and small roles, and she seems to have retired from acting, hasn't had any credits in 20 years, did have 1 or 2 producing credits on TV movies, so I'm not sure what she's up to, but she definitely is quite appealing in this movie, and I feel like unlike Adrienne Barbeau, who looks a bit lost, she clearly understands exactly what kind of character she's playing.
I agree. She got it more than anyone else in the movie, and she was the standout. One of the military guys, Barry Primus, has worked with Martin Scorsese, Josh, in Boxcar Bertha, his Corman picture. He was also in Cagney and Lacey and The Irishman and Absence of Malice.
Yeah, quite a career. I mean, he's worked with J.F. Lawton. I think he is in that movie Jackson from 2008, which is the last movie that J.F. Lawton directed. So quite a career from that guy.
I think you're right. Jim McCrell, who played Dean Stockwell, not the actor Dean Stockwell, just Dean Stockwell, was in Gremlins and hosted like game shows like Celebrity Sweepstakes. And then, of course, Pat Crawford Brown, a very familiar character actress. She just played the secretary. I remember her from Desperate Housewives, but she was also in General Hospital and Sister Acts 1 and 2.
Yeah, she is one of those actors. Like, I feel like there's a whole subset of those like old lady actors who probably started playing old ladies when they were like 45 and then just did it for the next 40 years. And she's very recognizable as the woman who gives Shannon Tweed all of those supplies. We talked about Adrienne Barbeau in our episode on The Fog. She, again, is maybe a more quote unquote respectable actor than some of these other people. Worked with John Carpenter, who she was married to for a time on The Fog and Escape from New York. She's in Creepshow and Swamp Thing, and she's still working steadily as a character actor. I don't know if we talked about it in our Argo episode, but she was in Argo. She does voice work, TV guest roles constantly. She's just recently in the new animated Watchmen movies. So, I mean, also one of these legends who I'm sure shows up at conventions a lot, but still works really steadily.
Right. Josh, tell me, or maybe Dave, you're our music guy. Tell me about the song Piranha Women of the Avocado Jungle of Death by Christine Lavin.
I can't really tell you. I did read, though, that it was inspired by this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's all I got for you.
That's good stuff. I see this movie. I feel like this isn't enough of a cult movie to qualify. Like, we couldn't have probably done this in our cult classic episode in 1989, but there is a cult for this. And I will say, maybe 10-ish years ago, I participated in this online thing that was called the White Elephant Blogathon, when people did blogathons. And it was modeled on a White Elephant gift exchange where a bunch of different film writers kind of put their own suggestions for movies that are not bad per se, but that are offbeat, strange, maybe campy. And, you were kind of, they got shuffled around and you were assigned to write about someone else's pick. And I did this for several years. And one of the years, my pick that got assigned to someone else was Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. So shout out to a real film critic, Kenji Fujishima, who wrote about this and very thoughtfully, very much appreciated it. So, he's on my side.
Josh, would you say I at least very thoughtfully didn't appreciate this?
Yeah, no, you certainly had your clearly thought out reasons, and they're totally fair. So that is Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. And that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can cook us online and on social media.
I'm in a pot. What's going on? Derp, derp, derp. We're at awesomemovieyear.com. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Are we on Blue Sky yet, Josh? You got to get us on.
We're
Blue
not.
Sky.
I am, but we'll get there. We're still on that other place, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're on the platform that should be cooked up in the jungle right now. I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy, all the things. Eat This Comedy. We got a show coming December 8th, which might be after this episode is released. But if not, come see us and find me on Letterboxd. Go for Jason.
You can find some old stuff from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I am at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky, where I do promote the podcast, and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And you can check out our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, including Blue Sky. I finally signed up for that. And you can also find me on Letterboxd by David Rosen.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
Josh, it's that time of year where we get into Christmas episodes and the holiday spirit. And what we've done for this season is, since we drafted movies from different years, we picked holiday movies from years that weren't drafted, but that we have covered in past seasons to create our holiday list. And nothing will get you into the holiday spirit more than Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut.
That is from 1999. So tune in next time for Eyes Wide Shut. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.